Hi, welcome to this video. I'm writing an A grade paragraph for your upcoming controlled assessment. This one is on Curley's wife is introduced through rumours. We've got loads of other videos, so have a look at our YouTube page. So here's the discussion topics that we've looked at in our classes. This video, like I say, will be on her being introduced through rumour. So please don't just talk about plot. If you just talk about plot, this will happen. Please concentrate on the things we're looking at in this video and analysing the language. So perfect PE, point, evidence, explain, which I'm sure you've done to death at school. So make a point, give evidence to support the point, and then say in your explanation why your evidence proves your point. But to get A grades and B grades, we're going to add the following. We're going to zoom in on a word or a phrase, or maybe one word or one phrase in the quote. Then we're going to discuss about 1930s America in that paragraph too. So the quote we're looking at is, well, I think Curley's married, ... ellipsis, a tart. My point is, Curley's wife is introduced through rumours. Please make your point really simple in your PE. We don't need points that are 3 or 4 sentences long because it will be very confusing to the reader, and if you get your point, evidence and explain jumbled up, you're going to struggle to get a decent grade. So my point is she's introduced through rumours. Before we meet Curley's wife with the ostrich feathers and the heavily made up and all that, we get a description from Candy, the guy on the left, okay? So Candy talks about that she's a tart and all that, okay? So basically Candy is a guide earlier on before we meet Curley's wife. He's a guide for George and Lenny, so he tells us about Curley, he tells us about Curley's wife, he tells us about the bunkhouse, he introduces the characters. So he's a guide for George and Lenny, but he's also a guide for the reader. He's almost Steinbeck's voice to the reader, so he's telling us all about these characters and what they think. So basically I'm going to talk about in my explanation, well, why this is unfair. So why the fact that we've never met this woman, but she's been classed as a tart, so we're going to talk about that. Then, talking about zooming in, we're zooming in on the words or phrases that we can talk about more and why Steinbeck has decided to use these words or phrases. So I think we can zoom in on the word think, I think we can zoom in on the ... the ellipsis, and I think we can zoom in on the word tart. And all I'm going to do is do one sentence in my paragraph on each of these little zoom in things. So I'm going to talk about the word think. Okay, so Steinbeck could have just made Candy say she's a tart. However, Candy says I think she's a tart. So that tells the reader that he's not totally sure. So we shouldn't be totally sure as a reader. So he's not definite she's a tart. So she might be a very nice person. Okay, then we've got ... which is the ellipsis. Again, this is almost like a pause in Candy saying it. So this pause might be because it's a secret. It might be a pause again because he's not sure. Maybe she is a nice person. But also remember, he's basically sort of slagging off the boss's son's wife to these two new people. So maybe he's not sure if he can say it to George and Lenny. Maybe Curley could be in the doorway and he hasn't seen him. So he's being very secretive. Then we're going to zoom in on the word tart and basically just talk about how it's a sexist term and derogatory, not a very nice term. And then we're going to talk about, in this paragraph, we can sort of maybe talk about the things we've already mentioned. So we can talk about the fact that Candy is a guide. Because it's to do with this quote, we can shove that in there. The Candy's a guide to the George and Lenny. We can also talk about, we've talked about in classes, that the fact where he's talking to a bunch of guys he's never met before, it's almost like a men's locker room. So it's almost like he's trying to impress them, like it's locker guy talk. And then we can talk about 1930s America. So the point is, Curley's wife is introduced through rumours when Candy says, well, I think Curley's married a tart. So basically I'm going to say in my explanation, talk about the word tart. As the reader has not met Curley's wife yet, this sexual term influences the reader to think Curley's wife is sexual, cheat and untrustworthy. So because we've never met her yet, this is unfair because it's just a rumour, it's just gossip, and then I've explained what the word tart means. So then I'm going to do one sentence and zoom in on each part that we've already talked about. Okay, so the word think. However, the reader is not totally sure as Candy uses the verb think to show he's not 100% sure of this. The ellipsis could suggest that this is a secret as Candy pauses and or hesitates before saying tart. Then I've talked about the guide. Candy is a guide to George and Lenny, but he's also a guide to the reader in introducing the characters. With this, he also introduces how Steinbeck wants us to think of these characters. So if you look at zoom in 1 and 2, All of that is one sentence explaining why the word think has been used, and one sentence explaining why they've used 3 dots or an ellipsis. So I've not written loads and loads and loads. I've not gone into massive detail, but I am showing to the marker of this controlled assessment I can pick out language and talk about why Steinbeck has used them. And then context, Candy is a lonely man, the ranch in 1930s America. So I'm basically talking about old person's role in 1930s America. As he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have anyone else to talk to, and in that time the elderly and disabled were left with no support. This may explain why he's so eager to share gossip with the new workers. So I'm just saying that the fact that the people who were older were left to their own devices were very lonely. Maybe that's the reason why he's so controversial in his views. And then there it is one big paragraph. So that looks like a kind of big scary paragraph. However, you would have probably done up to the green, so at the top where it says untrustworthy. You would have done that in a typical PE paragraph where maybe you're looking at a C grade or maybe a D grade. However, by using all the other stuff, talking about think, talking about the ellipsis, talking about 1930s America, you're going to push yourself up to a B or A grade. So it's really important that you do this in your controlled assessment. So make sure you have in your head point, evidence, explain, and then zoom in on the words in the quote or 1 or 2 words in the quote, and then discuss 1930s America. Obviously, you won't be able to zoom in on loads and loads of things like this quote in every quote, but you should be able to pick out at least one thing for zooming in and discuss context. So that's the end of the video. Any questions, drop me an email. Hopefully this has been some help to you.